everyone, welcome back to Crochet Delight. I'm Barbara, and today we're going to talk about some mistakes that I've made while spinning. So, this is another spinning experience, and I hope it's helpful to you guys. Okay, so first off, this first thing is not really a mistake, it's more something that you figure out and tweak here and there. It's the tension. The biggest mistake with the tension is having it too tight or too loose. So you'll learn over time that too much tension and sore throat in the morning, that if your tension is too tight, if you're actually spinning the yarn from the roving or the batting or whatever, spinning it raw even, your wheel will literally pull the fiber out of your hands if the tension is too tight. If it's too loose, you won't get any yarn or wool on your bobbin at all. So those are pretty much the big mistakes when dealing with the tension. But yeah, you definitely don't want it too tight. I've had it happen quite a bit. I have a bobbin that for some reason fits a little too tight on my wheel, so I have to adjust the tension down quite a bit just to get it so it doesn't pull the yarn out of my hand when I'm spinning. Alright, so that was the first one, tension. Alright, so another thing that is a big mistake, but it's something that you work on, is the speed that you spin. And what I mean by that is the speed that you have your treadle going. If you treadle fast, not very good for beginning. If you treadle too fast, it's like the tension, it will, well, kind of. You could end up ripping the wool right out of your hand, and also the very, very bad thing is you could twist it so far up into the roving that you can't untwist it until you turn your wheel the other way, or you somehow get it detached. So definitely don't spin too fast. Okay, so one of the things that they tell you to do when you're plying is to have each strand in between your fingers. Very good technique. It gives you a lot of control, and if you don't do that, you don't really have that much control, and it comes out kind of wonky. I've noticed that I've tried it a couple times just to see what it looks like when I don't have the strands between my fingers. It will end up kind of lumpy, and if you don't have that control where you have it in between your fingers for each strand when you're plying, if by chance your yarn does snap while you're plying, you can then get it back into the yarn while you're plying. It's a lot easier, whereas if you just let it hang loose and you spin, if one of them breaks, it falls to the ground, and you won't really be paying attention to where it had snapped off. But yeah, a very good tip. Do not say heck with it and not put the fibers in the strands in between your fingers when you're plying, because you don't know if your wheel is actually going to pull the fibers up loose enough from your tensioned lazy Kate to where it won't snap. So, snapping the yarn, definitely not a good thing. I've done that before, even on my drop spindle. I didn't like it, and I'm pretty sure no one else does too. So that's another big mistake that can be made. It's a fixable mistake, but it's a mistake that can be made and avoided. Alright, so this is so far my biggest mistakes. When you tie off your yarn onto your niddy noddy, do not tie it too loose or too tight. Too tight, if you're gonna dye it after you spin it, you'll end up with white spots where there shouldn't be white spots, or where you don't want the white spots. It's a completely different thing if you want the white spots. If you do, perfect. If not, don't do it too tight. And don't do it too loose. I have done this once with the drop spindle and once with my wheel. Just recently with my wheel. So, and what I mean by that is the yarn that I spun with my wheel versus the yarn that I spun with my drop spindle. Sorry, my foot's falling asleep. If you tie it too loose and you go to dye it, you will have a ginormous mess. And it won't be a mess of dye, it'll be a mess of the yarn. The yarn will be so unbelievably tangled. You would have to be a master at those finding your way through the maze type of puzzles, because that's exactly what type of puzzle this is. So yeah, don't tie it too loose. And if you have to, if you want to make sure that both ends don't end up just falling through, a good way to prevent it is tie the ends together. If you can actually get the ends to meet on the same spot on the niddy noddy, just tie them together real quick and then tie it off with little ties of scrap yarn, and there you go. So that after you're done dyeing, you can just snip that knot a little bit and there you go, your ends are loose. But trust me, it would save a lot of hassle, because just last night I had that problem. I accidentally tied it too loose because I went to dye some superwash wool, and oh my god, it took 5 hours just to untangle it. 5 hours. I literally sat in my chair for 5 hours and untangled that yarn. It was such a mess. Okay, I think this is the last biggest mistake for now. So far, these are all the mistakes that I've made, and all the mistakes that I'm refining and fixing as I go. But I think this is the last one. When dealing with superwash wool, if you are dyeing the wool after you spin it, be very careful of how you tie those ties. And like I just said, definitely if you can, tie the ends together before you tie it off, because it will help a lot. If you tie the ends together, you can tie those ties pretty loose, and you will not end up with nasty white spots where you don't want them. And with superwash wool, you really will end up with bright white spots where you don't want them. This is the color that I did. It's called Grape. I used grape Kool-Aid. So this one is the one that I had to untangle. the one that I did before, I didn't have to untangle, but I learned a lesson. I tied the ties like I normally do, and I ended up with quite a few white spots in it. So I kind of learned not to tie it as tight as I usually do when working with superwash wool. You can tie it fairly tight with other wools, but if you tie it too tight with the superwash wool, for some reason you end up with those white spots. I don't really understand why. I think it's because it's kind of like super treated wool, so the color doesn't stay as well, or I'm just tying it too tight to the point where the dye can't get to the wool. I don't know. But yeah, don't tie it too tight. So that's about it. I hope I was helpful to you guys. If any of you do spin and there's something I missed or something I haven't gotten to yet in my experiences, let me know and I'll make a separate video for it. And hopefully I'll find more mistakes that I can warn you guys about. So that's it. Have a delightful day and happy hooking, everyone!